This is MJ. Welcome to my fully operational Star Wars podcast. Join me as I take my next leg on the journey to Ahsoka. This time I'm talking about Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. If you didn't know, if you haven't been following along, I'm watching the films in order, like they should be, because they tell a single story. The prequel trilogy is the tragic fall of, or the rise and fall, really, of Anakin Skywalker. And the sequel trilogy, well, or I guess the original trilogy is what it really is. We'll talk about what that is after we talk about Return of the Jedi. So, Star Wars Episode 4, New Hope, that's what I'm discussing right now. And I have to say, it's either a level of genius, madness, or just fan obsessive compulsion or familiarity that makes me feel like A New Hope feels so much like Star Wars from the context of starting with The Phantom Menace. And what I mean is, you get to see the echoing and the rhyming of things from the first three movies in this fourth movie. And I know it's a little preposterous for me to talk about it as if Lucas planned this out properly, because he didn't. And I'm just going to break character for a minute here. As much as I don't like the sequel trilogy, and I think The Last Jedi is the best of the three movies, and I think it's legitimately a good movie, even if it's not the movie you wanted. I think it's a good movie, and it has guts, and it has vision and direction, and it's going someplace. Again, you may not like it, but I feel like Rian Johnson was Lucasian in how he chose to do things his own way and make big, bold choices. Slow and Low is unforgivable, though. Slow and Low is absolutely unforgivable. That's the worst thing in that movie. Anyway, so, yeah, I'm not a contrarian. I think I'm a careful watcher of movies, and I think I pay attention to Star Wars and understand Star Wars enough to know that, again, while you may not appreciate what he did, I think Johnson was kind of in line with some of Lucas's vision, as far as being bold and being willing to take risks and make moves that other people wouldn't make. Who else would have made Anakin start off as a 9-year-old slave boy? Who else would have had a time skip where his infatuation with Padme turned into a cringe-fest romance? Who else would have had the last movie in the trilogy start with the ending of the Clone Wars, and have Dooku reduced to a handless man on his knees who gets his head cut off like Anakin was playing Chucky from Child's Play with the giant scissors, scissoring off his head with two lightsabers, and then proceed to have that same awesome, super edgy, super dark, super cool, super tough Darth Vader, who everybody had known for, 20 plus years, and have him be a fool and a creep who's willing to massacre literal children. I mean, he basically turned Anakin into a school shooter so that he would get enough dark side points in order to have the dark side power to save his unborn child and Padme. A complete moral failure, a completely morally repugnant individual. And yet, in doing all that crazy stuff, Lucas put me in a position where I have warm feelings in my heart about Anakin. Because I got to see him go through all these different stages. I got to see him go through this process. I got to see the lure of the dark side tempt him and make him do illogical things that just didn't make any sense and didn't, ironically, tragically, didn't result in him meeting the end goal that he wanted to. The very things that he was willing to sacrifice and give up for, he ended up losing because of him sacrificing and giving up everything, throwing himself, throwing his soul, throwing his heart, throwing his morals away. And that brings me to a big contrast. And ironically, Luke does not appear for like the first 25 or 30 minutes of the movie. We start off with Anakin's other child, Leia, and she's on the Tantive 4 putting the Death Star plans in R2-D2. Of course, R2-D2 and C-3PO are familiar to us as Star Wars fans, as viewers of the Star Wars saga, the Skywalker saga, in this mode going 1 through 6. We know 3PO and R2 so well. They've done such great things. They've had such great moments with each other and with the rest of the cast of Star Wars, that seeing this, bun-headed brunette, putting plans into R2-D2 and commanding him to help her in her royal mission, it feels very familiar. It feels like it echoes, like it is an intentional echo of what happened in The Phantom Menace, and to a lesser extent, Attack of the Clones. And then when we finally, we get to see the bickering between R2 and 3PO, which wasn't a major part of the prequels. It's in the Clone Wars a lot, and it's definitely in the original trilogy, but it's not so much in the prequel trilogy. But we get to see it here. We get to see the rapport that they have, and we hear name drops like Bail, Organa, and we know Leia's an Organa, so she's ostensibly his daughter. But then when we get to Tatooine, we get to see that while Luke is not a slave, not a literal slave, he's not a slave with a chip in his arm or body that'll blow him up if he tries to run away. He is trapped on Tatooine. He's trapped being a moisture farmer. He's trapped with Owen Lars, who we met previously. And it's really interesting how it all feels so cozy and so familiar and so much like this is the well-worn universe that it is, and that it's become, that it's turned out to be. And I don't know, it's amazing. I've seen A New Hope so many times, and I've seen the prequels so many times, and it almost feels like the more I watch them, the more they blend together and the more they work. Obi-Wan looks way too old to have been Ewan McGregor in Revenge of the Sith and now be Alec Guinness in A New Hope, but it works. And something about Alec Guinness' performance, it makes him feel like a haunted war veteran who's harboring all these secrets. And the way that Lucas went back and, retroactively changed the continuity and backfilled the backstory by making the prequels, it feels like when he says that Anakin was a great pilot and a great friend, and, he was this great Jedi that Obi-Wan had all these adventures with, and that Vader was a pupil of his who turned to evil and betrayed and murdered Anakin and hunted down the rest of the Jedi. It feels like all those things are true, and it feels like all those things blend in with, it feels like Alec Guinness is acting as if he's Obi-Wan, having memories of Order 66 and of Anakin in the prequels, and even throughout the Clone Wars, if you're crazy enough like me to have watched so much of that. And it's remarkable how well made the movie is. And I don't know, it's really interesting. Vader gives the line on the Death Star, "I sense a presence that I haven't felt since," and he trails off. One of my favorite Japanese writers of tokusatsu is Toshiki Inoue, and he does a lot of crazy stuff in his writing. But something that I observed as I was looking at his writing very closely about a year ago, I never finished a certain show. I need to go back and finish it. I want to go back and finish it, just I haven't allowed myself to yet. But anyway, in this show, which is a Super Sentai, which is what Power Rangers is based off of, he writes this strange universe. It's a near-Earth, it's a near-human universe, but it has all this crazy supernatural elements in it. And the way he writes the human relationships and the interactions between people and the magic, they all balance out, the magic of Super Sentai, I mean, they all balance out in this really interesting way where you kind of assume that, okay, these are people, they're human beings, they wear pants. They dress vaguely like us, except for, kind of spacey with robes and whatever. They have special funky costumes, but they're basically human. So basic human rules and logic and norms apply to them. But then he sprinkles in these things, and I'm speaking of Lucas and Inoue now, he sprinkles in these things where they're not normal humans. They're off in this strange land, far away, and displaced from us in time and culture, and we just accept certain things as a given. We accept things that are presented or said as a given. We accept the Clone Wars. We accept, the fact that droids aren't welcome in a bar for some reason. We accept all these things because they're given to us and they're shown to us and they're accepted by the characters that we're watching. And that combination basically makes us as the audience suggestible and open to anything that the author, that the writer, the director wants to put forth to us. So this implication that Vader gives that he hasn't seen Obi-Wan since, or he hasn't sensed this presence since, and then you determine that it's the last time that he and Obi-Wan met. There was probably a fateful battle between the two of them. We don't really know. And then later on you get the follow-up of, when I left you, I was but the student. Now I am the master. Only a master of evil doth. Those interactions frame our perception of this world that we have such limited context of. We get to see this world, this lived-in galaxy exploding with story potential and possibilities and rabbit trails to go down, which the EU has done to great extent, and fan theorizing has done to a great extent as well. And we just are able to draw these conclusions from what's being presented to us in this world because, well, if he's saying that and he's a person, then it's reasonable to assume this, even though it's not necessarily reasonable. We didn't know about... I still haven't watched Kenobi because I just wasn't really interested in it because, well, I like John Jackson Miller's Kenobi better. How do I know that if I haven't seen the show? I've heard enough people complain about the show that I'm pretty sure I prefer John Jackson Miller's Kenobi book, which is fabulous, absolutely fabulous, to the Kenobi series. I may watch it someday, I may not, who knows. But my point is... I'm familiar with Star Wars, both as a fan who's seen these things a bunch of times and also just somebody who's been watching these things, within rapid succession of each other as I'm going through getting ready to jump into this, new, hopefully amazing Star Wars adventure in Ahsoka. And I don't know, it's just remarkable to me how it blends together. And I almost think it only blends together so well because George Lucas and his collaborators bottled lightning in making Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope. They made it so good. They made it's such a well-crafted movie. And, I don't know if these are Marshall Lucas cuts with Obi-Wan or with Alec Guinness's performance or what they are. But something in his performance, something in the way Mark Hamill reacts to him, something in the vagaries of the dialogue and how it leaves itself open to interpretation. All of these things blend together. The fact that it was shot on widescreen 35mm film, all of these things, and the beautiful paintings done by what's his name? The concept artist. He did paintings of matte paintings on glass for the different effects too. Ralph McQuarrie, right? Anyway, all of these things blend together in such this magical way that it really makes it feel as if Episode 4, 5, and 6 could have come after Episodes 1, 2, and 3. And while they have different looks to them, it almost feels like it's intentional. Well, these movies look like this because they represent the Gilded Age, or whatever. And these episodes look like this because they represent, Soviet Russia, or the Soviet Union as it's in its decay, and before it falls apart, and, before it falls apart. I'm not good enough at history to name out specific things and not sound like a jerk, so I won't do that. So, anyway, it's just remarkable to me that somehow these things knit together. And again, Obi-Wan, Alec Guinness is way too old, unless he just looks really old. And he doesn't say he's too old, and we know the man is not beyond bending the truth, so he could be saying to Luke, I'm too old for this because I need you to take over. I need you to be in a position to take over, whether that's because he's getting messages from Qui-Gon or he's just got a vibe from the Force or because he feels like he's too old for this stuff. He's too old for this Sith. I don't know, it creates this awesome blend, and I'm kind of floored by what an amazing movie Episode 4 is in and of itself, and then the way that it blends and picks up from where Revenge of the Sith left off, it impresses me all the more. And really, the whole prequel trilogy where that left off. So, I found it remarkable that you have out in space on the Tantive 4, then you have the Tantive 4 and the Death Star as a set or location. You have Tatooine as a location. You have, I guess, on the Millennium Falcon in space a location, and you have a little bit of where was the Messiah Temple? Yavin. You have a little bit of Yavin 4 as a set or a location. There's really only like 4 broad locations in this movie, and yet it feels like a huge sprawling adventure that goes far. It goes a lot of places, and it's shocking that that's so. More echoes of the past. So, Obi-Wan talks about Anakin being a great pilot, and, knowing these movies already, knowing, spoilers, if you're unaware, that Anakin is Vader, that he becomes Vader, seeing Vader go out and lead from the front and take 2, ostensibly really good TIE fighters with him, TIE fighter pilots with him, to go fight in the trenches and get his hands dirty, it feels so much like Anakin. And before, it just made Vader seem like, oh, he's this, scary guy who, has this magical Force thing, like when you originally saw it, and I guess he's a good pilot because of the Force. And then having all of Anakin's backstory, it makes it feel like there are echoes of Anakin Skywalker in Darth Vader, that there's certain things that are true of him that don't let go, that he wants to lead from the front, that he wants to be in the thick of things, that he wants to be doing his duty, that he wants to be being that hero that he somehow sees himself as in this, from this twisted perspective, this twisted point of view, and he wants to go out there and defend the lives of the millions or however many hundreds of thousands of people are on the giant space station that is the Death Star. And he wants to protect the peace, justice, and order that he has brought to his galaxy, with his hands so soaked in the blood of the innocent. And it's kind of chilling to watch it in that perspective. And like seeing him in that TIE fighter, and it feels so much like the Jedi Starfighter that was in Revenge of the Sith that he was flying around in towards the end there. It's just remarkable how much he feels like it could be the same guy, like the same guy. There's the core of the same guy in that suit. And I'll just spill it now. I think the prequel trilogy is the rise and fall, the tragic fall of Anakin Skywalker, the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, and the original trilogy is like the redemption of Darth Vader, or the redemption of Anakin Skywalker through his children. And I'm pretty sure Lucas has said that in interviews and stuff, and I'm just echoing that now, but I really do feel like it, and I really feel Anakin in Vader, and it's sad, and it makes it a little sadder and a little sweet seeing the echoes of Padme in Luke and the echoes of Anakin in Leia. I really feel like she's her father's daughter and he's his mother's son. Luke's more diplomatic, he's more gentle, he's more caring, he's more earnest and sincere, and Leia's more hard-edged and got a short temper and is willing to do whatever she has to, whereas I feel, Padme did what she had to, but I feel like she was a lot more straight-laced than Anakin ever was, and I feel like that's kind of reversed in the twins. And I don't know, it's so odd to see that, it's so interesting to see that, and it's like, it hurts knowing that Anakin grew up as a slave on Tatooine, and seeing that Luke has grown up enslaved to the Lars homestead in a way on Tatooine. He's bound there by duty and by family and by these bonds that he can't seem to break, and then those, the death of Owen and Beru frees him and sets him on this journey where he can become a Jedi like his father before him, his father who he didn't know, his father who he wants to be like, his father who he wishes to measure up to, and it's so sad. It's such a sad, tragic, bittersweet start to the adventure, and then I don't know, it's interesting because you have Leia losing her mother and father and all her people on Alderaan as well. And, those were her parents. And she knew she was adopted, but, of course, this isn't stuff we get in the movie. I'm carrying all this baggage with me from the EU and other places and other movies. But again, the movie stands on its own without all these things. And it's just amazing how much richer of an experience it is knowing all these different things. And I really like that. And I feel like, The Ahsoka show is probably, or hopefully it'll be the same way, that it'll be good on its own if you haven't seen Ahsoka in anything else. But if you've seen her in Rebels and in Mando and was she in Book of Boba Fett? I can't remember. I think she was an episode. But if you've seen her in all these other things like I have, then we'll be able to carry those things with us into the experience of watching her show, and hopefully besides, like I said, besides all those things being brought forward with it, it's just a good show in its own right, and it feels good to an audience that's getting exposed to her for the first time in her story. So, anyway, that's all I have to say. I like A New Hope. I think it's a really good movie, and I love how it fits in the rest of the context of the other movies. So, with that, that's all I have to say. This is MJ signing out. I hope you people take care of yourselves. Until next time. I hope you enjoyed that. Go to mjmunoz.com to leave any questions, comments, or other feedback you might have. There you can find all of my analysis, art, and fiction. I cover books, tokusatsu, comic books, anime, and more. Look around. You're sure to find something else that you'll enjoy as well. This has been a Story Over Everything production.